What you need is a theme, a plan, a strategy. What are you bringing people together for? For you, you could bring people at different levels. You could bring people who wanted to start a podcast. You could put a mastermind together that is, they've learned the basics, maybe in a course, and now you're supporting them in their first year.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcaster, it's your host, Adam Adams. And today I am with Liz Scully, who is a business coach. And what we're talking about is setting up systems, setting up ways to help your income improve. So over the past couple of years, she's been able to start putting these things in, and she already sees that in the next few months, everything's taking hold. And so you might be wondering, how is it taking hold? What is it that she's doing? Let's ask her now. So Liz, you help people get systems in place. Can we talk about some of the systems that you're putting in place and just go straight in? Your bio's already in the show notes. Your link to your website's already in the show notes. Let's go straight into how the listener, who's a podcaster and a business owner, how can he or she start to make systems so that they can be making more money in the next few months?
So I don't think of them in systems terms as in this is a standard operating practice kind of thing. It's more of a strategy as a system.
Okay.
So for most people, I think when they start their podcast, for many of us, it's I'll interview cool people. It'll be lovely. Maybe I'll make some sponsorship cash. That'll be nice. And that's your level one thinking about all of these things. Level two might be I'll interview people who might become clients. And I suspect if you've done a lot of guesting on podcasts, you might have seen those thinly veiled qualification stuff. So it's very clear that they want you to be a client and the podcast is just an excuse side of things. And that's becoming quite prevalent. So those are level one and level two. What I've been doing in my business and what I encourage my clients to do is to move into a level three and a level four. So we can interview people, but we can also build an educational backbone for our whole business, like an ecosystem. So for someone to buy from you, what do they need to know? Now, obviously, if you've had your business for more than a couple of seconds, you've got lots of social media out there, lots of information, but it might be a little bit disparate. So just as when you build a launch, that is a path to a particular product, a particular thing you're selling, I'm talking about taking that and building it to everything you're selling. So taking curriculum from your course, taking small parts of it and doing special episodes about it, interviewing people so that it's clear that you're moving people from who is this person to, oh, they seem to know a lot of things, to maybe I should give them some money to do that for my business. So that building a curriculum is educational design. And you can do it in very simple ways. What does someone need to know to trust me enough to work with me? And it might be, do I have, so in my case, it would be like, does this woman know anything about strategy? Does she understand business?
I want to, forgive me for pausing you for a second. I want to make sure that I've got the note, because you had level one, which I think it was like, this is basic. Hey, this is going to be lovely. This is going to be fun. I'm going to just interview people, have good conversations. Am I getting level one right, though? Is it just
exactly.
having good conversations?
Yes, meeting some cool people, maybe getting some sponsorship cash.
Okay, and maybe getting sponsors. Okay, and then level two is you strategize, hey, I'm going to have this podcast because I'm going to interview the people that I can work with. I'm going to highlight them. And you also mentioned that it is, quote, very clear and that they are, that like you're basically wanting to work with them. And that this strategy, level two type, is becoming prevalent.
Yes.
And I would like to at least define a level 3 and 4, just have them out so that as you're talking, I can be thinking about the different levels. What is level 3 specifically?
So level 3 would be building an information ecosystem. So this is the educational design. What do people need to know to work with me?
Give me a second. Ecosystem. And then in quotes, what do they need to know before they hire me?
Why would they not?
What's a level 4?
So level 4, this is the best bit. So this is thinking about how you will use that information in the right way. So say we did a sales call, you were thinking of working with me. Afterwards, I could take some episodes from my podcast or my YouTube channel or whatever it is that I'm building, and I can then send it to you. I'll give you an example. I have some clients who are artists, and they have podcasts about running a business, being an artist, all of that stuff. After a client has spoken to them, they could send episodes on how to be a collector, not a buyer, how to look after the artwork, how to choose your next piece, how to look after it long term, all of those things. Now, if you've already made the content, it's very easy to stick a playlist together and send it over. So it's building on what you've already done.
Years back, I had a different podcast that I sold 5 years ago. When I had that show, I would go to different conferences in my genre. It was real estate. And I had just a small handful, maybe 3 or 4 episodes that I remembered the episode numbers. So if somebody was saying, I want to invest in real estate, but I don't know what market to go to, then I would say, hey, you got to listen to episode 424. I interviewed this one person. We talked about this and this. And all of the takeaways that you need are in there. And somebody else, they're like, I really want to start passively investing. I want to be a limited partner in apartment buildings like this. And I don't know how to protect myself. Then I'll say, if you listen to these 2 episodes, it'll give you all the information you need in order to protect yourself when investing with somebody else. Is that a level 4? And if not, can you share with me what's different?
That is textbook. I would say the only tweak would be to make it even, to send it to people so that it's even easier for them to get together.
Okay.
And what you could do is if you found at that conference that people were always asking about a question that you didn't have an episode for, you go back to level 3 and you start making content that fills in the gaps that your potential clients want. And 3 and 4 work together really well. What do I need to send people after I've been speaking with them? What do I need when they finish working with me? Any of that information that is going to be pleasant and useful again and again. You go back to level 3 and you make it. And then potentially, if you've spoken to people who might become clients in level 2, you can send them some of your level 3 super helpful stuff. So it's moving up and down the levels all the time.
Okay. And with that said, is it that if I'm listening right now, am I thinking I should only be at level 4 or something like that, or 3 and 4? Or if I'm listening and I'm putting out content through my podcast, in your opinion, Liz, is it possible to encompass all 4 of these levels at the same time without offending someone or without making them think they're just trying to sell me or whatever it is? Is it possible to have all 4 of them at the same time? Or do we want to just move to just one of the levels, in your opinion?
No, I think you want all of it, because when it's done, if we go back to level 2, meeting people who might become clients, some of them might not become clients, but they might become affiliates, they might become friends. Having them on the show is a great way to warm people up, and you're having a cool conversation. Maybe you're learning something from them that you want to go to level 3, because that I should expand on that point. Let me make an episode for level 3. Then I can send it to them in level 4. I think you should be dancing up and down the levels all the time. And it should be not only interesting for you, but for your listener.
Okay. And for you, if we think about 3 years, you did a certain amount of last year. You're doing a certain amount of that's a little bit better this year, and next year being even better.
Yes.
What are you going to be doing differently to make that happen? We'll be right back.
Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, GrowYourShow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show.
We're back with Liz Scully, and she's the host of the Biz Book Podcast. And if you're curious what the Biz Book Podcast is, the link is down in the show notes. Go ahead and scroll down. Before the break, we were talking about how you can do level 1, which is having good conversations with other people on your podcast. Level 2, which is like interviewing the person that you want to work with and potentially working with them. Level 3 was when you build information and education that you sell to more people. So it's having that bank account of episodes that allows your perfect avatar, the person you want to work with, to know everything they need to know before they hire you. And then we talked about a level 4, which was how do you use the information in the right way? And an example that we discussed that she mentioned was being able to send this information to people so that they already know how to use it. And I brought up how I would talk to people at conferences and say, this would be good. And that's pretty much a level 4. And you could even go a step further by doing this. All of that information was in the first part of the episode. And I want to get into this thing. Remember right before the break, I said, last year was great, did better than most people. This year is already doing better than that. And next year, we've got systems in place. So if you're listening and you want to figure out, how do I get those systems in place? How do I grow? Let's find out what Liz Scully is doing starting now. All right, Liz, prior to that teaser and that advertisement, what is it that you're putting in place that's going to help the next few months or the next year do even better than now? And how can the listener implement that?
So for me, I'm relaunching one of my courses that is about running masterminds. So for people to do that, they need to know, what is a mastermind? Why do I want to join one? Why are most masterminds not very good? And what's it like being in a mastermind? So I've begun to create specialist shows about that. Interesting for the listener, but very helpful for me. One of them, for instance, is I'm doing a panel show, my first panel show for the BizBook broadcast. And I'm bringing in a bunch of my favorite masterminders to talk about what it's like to be in a mastermind and how it works and why it's different. So an interesting set of voices. We can all use snippets of it for social media, which is helpful. Because they all run masterminds as well, because they have drunk the mastermind Kool-Aid very much. So that's helpful. But I'm also building core information that, as you said, at conferences, if people go, but my mastermind was awful, why was that? I will have an episode I can send them to. So I'm building the building blocks. Instead of it just being in a launch funnel, it's there all the time. Plus, I'm interviewing people who are becoming increasingly interested in every time I see you, Liz, you talk about these masterminds. So that's level 2 stuff. I'm like, yes, you should join one. You should run one. Classic level 2 stuff. And then I'm building the educational stuff in level 3. And I can see from my listeners and from the questions I'm getting in my own inbox that this stuff that I normally only really kept on a few blogs or during a launch, because it's out there all the time. You know what podcast listeners are like. We binge when we find something we're interested in. So they have literally got us inside their head. In my case, going, masterminds are wonderful. You should have a mastermind. So I know my launch is going to go well. And then I know that some of the people that are in that launch will also become masterminders. And some of the people might be guests from the show who I've got to know over interviewing them 2 or 3 times, because that was also part of my design, is that I don't interview people just once, they're on 2 or 3 times. So I get to see them regularly.
I like that. I had a friend who did something similar to that. This guy, he had a daily show, the longest running real estate daily show in the world. I don't know how many episodes he has now, but it might be 2,500 or something like that. He's been going every single day for, 9 years or something like that. And He does his Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday episodes are always somebody coming in for the very first time. On Monday through Thursday, he does a 7-day a week, as I mentioned, but Monday through Thursday, you're here on my show for the first time you've ever been on my show. And what is he asks them the same type of questions. Then on Friday, it's different. He calls it Follow Along Friday. And what he does there is he tells people what's going on in his own business. And I think that allows his avatar or his listener to resonate with him, to understand what he does. How could I work with you? And so it brings that person in and says, you know what? Maybe I should just work with him or something. And then on Saturday and Sunday, he has these other type of episodes where, like you just mentioned, Liz, when you want somebody to come on your show, you want them to come on multiple times, 2-3 times. So he'll bring on the guests that he likes and work with him and have some information. He'll bring him on another time to do, I don't remember what he calls the Saturday and Sunday episodes, but they basically go into second level and third level type things. What's a bad situation that you got out of? Or what is a really cool thing that you're doing with your business, like giving back or whatever? And by doing this, he brings those people back a couple of times and he selects the people out of the new people that he's having these conversations with every single week. He's determining, oh, you know what? I could have that person back. I could have that person talk about this thing. And maybe I could work with them. And maybe they would add more value to my listener. Or maybe they would help me get more sponsors on my show. Or maybe they could be a sponsor for the show. So he does it strategically. And you're the first person besides him that I've heard have that type of conversation. Like, I do this like this. I have them on the show purposely more than once. And I thought that was interesting. And I think it's all not just interesting, but also something that our listener today, who's a podcaster, could implement, especially if they're doing in that level 2, where they're having these conversations with somebody, as you mentioned before. You said you could work with them, or they could be an affiliate or a friend or a partner or whatever. So if they are somebody who could be an affiliate and you continue to have that face-to-face time with that person, they're more likely to trust you and think of you when, for example, you help people grow mastermind groups. And so if that person comes on 2 or 3 times to your show and somebody's, I really want to have a mastermind, then it's obvious they're going to think, oh, you know what? You need to talk to my friend, Liz Scully. You got to talk to her. I've had multiple conversations with her. I now trust her because of the multiple interactions. And she's the one person I can think of in this space. And I'm hoping that the listeners getting that concept as well and saying, wow, that could be a thing. Liz, you're more than welcome to share more on this. And I also want to ask you about just a little bit of information, how someone could build a mastermind, since you do have expertise in that. So any other information you want to share about how are you making next year better than this year? And then let's go into the other part about masterminds.
Sure. The other thing I really wanted to emphasize is that having people on a couple of times, it's a very natural conversation where the listener is going to be hopefully very interested in that as well. I think we all like to have familiar voices. My show is only half an hour long and it's got ad breaks in it. So it's very short. So having people on as a regular, I think, is nice for the listener as well. So it's not just convenient for me. I think it's pleasant for the listener too.
I like that you said it's convenient for you, because because here I am a lot of the times and I'm like, crap, I'm running out of episodes. I gotta reach out. I've got to get some new people on. But by going back to people that have been on or setting it up like as they're on your show that day, you talked about how you can do this and this. Why don't we have 3 episodes? Today, we'll talk about X, and we'll have you back on in a couple of weeks. We'll talk about Y, and after that, we'll get you back on a third time. We could talk about Z. And that way you don't have to throw all of the information all at once. there's a lot of smartness to the way that you have this set up. And I realize, Liz, I totally cut you off, and I'm hoping it was valuable to the listener. Do you remember where you were when I cut you off?
I was extolling how it's good for listeners to have the same voices all the time. I really do think so. And I think that one of the other things that we don't value enough, so obviously I have chosen the topic of my podcast very carefully. So I help business owners. If I'm talking about masterminds, I'd like them to join a mastermind or run a mastermind. So if you are a speaker, if you have a book and you don't have a mastermind, you really should. So me interviewing them about their book is a really simple step. Do you have a mastermind? I don't. Let me tell you about them. Second time I see them. Have you started that mastermind yet? No, but send me some stuff. Third time. It's the nicest form of attrition without it being salesy follow-up. So choosing your theme really carefully. Obviously, you have a podcast business. You have a podcast about podcasting. If you had one about, raising rabbits, it wouldn't help your podcast business at all. Might help your rabbit business, but it wouldn't do anything useful. So I think it's important to go right back to the beginning and build something that is right from the beginning going to set you up to be having conversations that are at least in the ballpark of people that are likely to become clients.
Awesome. And is there any other takeaway that we may have missed for the listener to, if they're asking right now, okay, how do I really take the next few months to make next year my biggest year ever? Are there any other takeaways that we should share with the listener right now?
I think the big takeaway is be very conscious as you're designing your show and as you're designing the episodes that they are helpful in more than one way. I think of it as stacking, so that the interview will maybe lead to a friendship, that will maybe lead to referrals, that will maybe lead to a client, that will also be helpful for your curriculum, that will also be helpful for something that you can send or use on social media, just a little snippet of it. So if you can have it so that every step you make is as efficient as possible, that's really helpful. And the way to do that is to not simply think, I should start a podcast and just rush into it. Make a plan, my friends, make a plan.
I agree with that 100%. Don't rush into this podcast. It's funny because on that point, a piece of advice that I hear more than probably 85%, probably close to 90+% of the people, whether they're podcast coaches or they've been podcasting for a number of years, when they're talking to a newbie, most people say, don't overthink it. They say, just start. They say done is better than perfect. And they say ready, fire, aim. And I'm like, you dummy. It's ready, aim, fire. If you don't start your podcast thoughtfully with a plan, if you don't start your business, if you don't start your life, if you don't start your marriage, if you don't start your exercise plan, if you want to start something better, if you want the best results, to go ready, aim, fire, to really understand. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have every single detail mapped out and you need to spend 10 years trying to figure it out. But it also doesn't mean that you just jump in and start a random podcast with a random name. It needs to be thoughtful. That going in and starting a podcast can take a few days, even maybe a few hours, as long as it's being thoughtful and you understand calling it this because this is who I'm attracting. I'm interviewing these type of people because of this. As long as you can answer those questions thoughtfully, I think now you can start a podcast. But with all these people, don't worry about it. When we start a crappy podcast, for example, no offense to 90+% of the people with podcasts, when we start a podcast that we haven't thought through the process, we end up having a show that may as well be called a diary rather than something that gets in front of 10 listeners, 1,000 listeners, 1 million listeners. If we can do it thoughtfully, we go ready, aim, fire, and launch it with plan and purpose, we can get it to really go. So I love that you said that. I want to share a little bit of what you've said so far, and I might ask you about that mastermind right after. how people can start a mastermind. A reminder to the listener, I hope you took good notes before the break. It was level 1 podcasters are just having a good conversation. Level 2 podcasters are trying to bring their guests in as potential clients. Level 3 is you put out the content that you know is going to answer the questions so people can hire you. And level 4 is using it the right way, getting it in front of the right person. And we're talking also about how Liz is making next year better than this year. She's relaunching a mastermind course. As she does that, she's making shows that are specialized for that purpose. Shows that talk about masterminds, that interview people that have been in or run masterminds. She's even having a panel show. She's bringing in her favorite masterminds people, and those snippets can be broken apart from this panel discussion and put all over different parts of social media. Additionally, if she learns something from them, it can become more content that she expounds on in another place. And she interviews some of the people, most of the people, more than once, 2 or 3 times. And another brilliant thing that we didn't talk about when you do that is there's these things called callbacks and call forwards. Liz is nodding her head saying, I know exactly what that is. But if you're listening and you don't know what that means, what happens is if I bring John back on my podcast, on the second time that John's on my show, then I can call backwards. Hey, John was on episode blah, blah, blah. We call it 500. And on episode 500, he taught all about this stuff. The link's in the show notes, which allows that person who's listening to John today to end up, like Liz said, binge listening. Like a lot of podcast listeners, they want to listen to multiple. And if they like what they're getting today with John's episode, then they're going to go back and they're going to listen to 2 episodes today, which will trigger algorithms and grow your show. And you can also do call forwards. Hey, I'm talking to Liz today, and we're talking about how to make next year better. And on episode, let's just say 1000, she's going to come back and we're going to talk about growing a mastermind or whatever. So then you as a listener are like, oh, too bad I'm not getting that mastermind today, but I know what to look forward to. When that episode comes out, I'm going to listen to it. So callbacks and call forwards are brilliant when doing an interview with somebody more than once. It's a good way to keep getting multiple downloads. And do you remember that what she said as she was utilizing number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 of the different levels? She mentioned that her guest is an author. They have a book. Her podcast is obviously called the Biz Book Podcast, which is down in the show notes. And that's down in the show notes. You can click on it. Remember, she said, if you've got a book, you should have a mastermind. So she brings that person on 2 or 3 times and slowly asks them, hey, why don't you have a mastermind? And it's a natural sales process. And they might be saying, you're right. Why don't I? You're right. I could be making an extra 40 grand a month or whatever it is if all I did was had fun and had a mastermind and had 10 people paying me $4,000 a month or whatever it is. And then she mentioned helpful for your listeners and followers in more than one way. That's the content that you're putting out. If it's helpful for your listeners, great. But if you can find a way to make it serve more than one purpose, Liz, I don't know what video games you play. I don't play a lot. But I do play this one stupid video game on my phone. It's called Clash Royale, and I love it. Clash Royale, you're a king fighting against another king in their castle, and you're trying to take down the different towers. And one thing that I do a lot is you've got these things called fireballs, and I try not to, I can take one of their guys out with a fireball pretty easy. I try to wait. I try to be strategic. I don't just throw that fireball out when I can. I say, you know what? Let me wait. Let me be patient for a second and see. Maybe they'll drop 2 or 3 guys in the same place to blitz me. And so I'll hold on to this fireball for a sec. Maybe I can kill 3 guys with 1 fireball. Maybe if I just chill the F out for a sec, I might be able to make better use of this. And that's what Liz is doing. She's making sure that the content that she puts out has a way to do more than one thing. And I even put a quote, don't rush. She said, don't rush. And that's how I think of it when I'm playing that dumb video game is I don't have to do this now. I can see if I might be able to make this even more effective if I just have strategy behind it. Liz, with that said, how would I start a mastermind? I'm hearing that I might be able to make an extra 10 grand a month, an extra 20, 30. I have a friend who's making 40 grand a month with his mastermind, about $500,000 a year just by having a fun mastermind. They met 3 or 4 times a year and that's it. If I'm hearing this and I'm like, oh, I'm already doing this thing, how would the listener go about launching a mastermind in whatever field that they are in?
Obviously, I think masterminds are fantastic and I think everyone should both be in one and run them. But as with podcasts, you need to have a strategy before you start. You can't just rush into, many people do, and that's why there are many bad masterminds out there. But in essence, a mastermind is a small group of people who meet regularly, set goals one time which will be done by the next time you meet. The secret to good masterminding is really careful curation. I think bad masterminds come from a cash grab. Oh, apparently I could make 10 grand a month per person on this. Wouldn't it be great? I know 10 people. I could start a mastermind. No, you can't. Or rather, you could, but please don't. What you need is a theme, a plan, a strategy. What are you bringing people together for? You could bring people at different levels. You could bring people who wanted to start a podcast. You could put a mastermind together that is, they've learned the basics, maybe in a course, and now you're supporting them in their first year. Or you could put together a mastermind of people who they've got 200,000 listens now, so it's now time for them to level up, or how to get sponsorship. So make sure that there is a really clear plan. What is the outcome? Make sure you can achieve it. If they do the work, you can provide the container for them to get there. So be very selective about who goes into the group. Be very selective about what the group does. And obviously, I think you should get some training in how to run a mastermind. That's just a plug for my own stuff, but I do think it's important. You need to know how to manage a group because a mastermind isn't just about facilitation. Your friend that has that sounds marvelous mastermind, people stay in it because it works, because they're getting a great result, because the quality of the other people in the group are so high that it is worth them taking 2 or 3 weekends out of their year to go and do that. So you've got to be making something that is really high quality. It's like back in the days where it was like, just sell things by webinars. But the webinar doesn't mean anything. It's just a delivery system for it. So build a structure, just like with a podcast. What is the outcome? What are we helping people do? How are we getting there? Those things make it really possible. And then when you've got your group together, I've spoken to probably thousands of people about masterminds now. And I always ask people, tell me about a bad mastermind. And they always say, yeah, I was in this one and I knew that guy was going to be problems. I had a feeling about that person. And when we're putting a group together, we just want to get it started. And we tend to ignore that moment where we think, that person, maybe they're not a good fit. No, I'll just start it. You put them in there. 6 months later, you realize that your intuition was right. There was something that wasn't a good fit there. So listen to that.
I want to ask you a question because my mom came to me after she retired from corporate America. She was excited and she wanted to start something new. And what I remember her doing is joining a couple of masterminds. And a day came and happened and I just said, hey, I can't come to someone's birthday. I don't remember, but there was like a birthday party or some type of gathering. Like I won't be there because I've got this mastermind that I go to 3 times a year. And I've been doing it for something like 6 or 7 years in a row. And she had this bad taste in her mouth. And she came to me with a question as kind as she could, but with the bad taste in her mouth from these other experiences. And she goes, do you even like a mastermind? Why would you do a mastermind? Are they all just there trying to sell you into the one-on-one coaching? And she goes, I want to start a real mastermind, a good one, but I just don't know if they exist. Why do you keep spending lots of money every year to go to this one group? And I thought about it. I go, you know what? Our mastermind is the end result. He doesn't try to sell you on the one-on-one coaching. The mastermind group is the top thing. And what I've found, Liz, is that a lot of the people, and when I'm talking a lot, I'm like 70% of the people that I encounter that start a mastermind, they're not really starting a mastermind. They're starting a group coaching program, which is that they're the leader and they teach lots of people at the same time, but they call it a mastermind. Or they have a mastermind that's really only meant for a stepping stone to get to the highest ticket thing. And it has put a bad taste in my mom's mouth and others. I just got lucky. I got lucky because the mastermind that I joined was one that I have stayed in for years. And I haven't wanted to go to another person. I haven't wanted to pay more for something else. And he's the guy who runs it, not trying to sell something else. So I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that I have a good definition of mastermind, part of it? And if the listener's listening and they're thinking about starting something, like, where would their pitfall be if they started it wrong?
So we start with this. So first of all, that story of your mother hating masterminds because she had a bad taste from lots of others, so common. And the problem is that mastermind is an unregulated word. It would be different if I was in charge of the world, but sadly, I am not. One day I will create, so that I've been planning for years, one day I will create BOOM, the Federation of Mastermind Excellence, that will stamp out all bad masterminds very simply. Till that happens, and to be fair, some of the reason I'd like to do that is because I wish to be president of the Federation. But that's a personal goal more than anything. Till then, you're right, there are many bad masterminds. And I think the problem is the things that are bad usually aren't actually masterminds. As you say, they're a training program or a group program or a networking setup or just a nice weekend where you get to hang out with other business owners. They're not actually a mastermind. A mastermind has to have that element of that coaching environment where you get to ask the questions that don't feel safe in other spaces, because it's such a safe space in this, but not that you're in danger elsewhere, but it is a place that you can ask questions that maybe would make you feel a bit foolish elsewhere. You can go and get honest feedback from people that you trust. And I really genuinely think there are very few places as a business owner that you can really ideate. And that's what a mastermind will give you, a space where you can really think through your options and have a bunch of people you trust give you sensible advice. And that comes from very careful curation, because my masterminds are the same. People stay in them for year on year because it works, because often they've been through other sort of mastermind refuge, terrible places that were claiming to be masterminds but weren't. So if you're going to start one, this is why outcome is so important. Why would people join it? What is the results you can pretty much guarantee they're going to get? And curate like it's your job. Because if you're running a mastermind, it is your job. Make sure the right people are in the right space.
We talked about a lot of cool things on this episode. The 4 levels of sharing on podcasts. We talked about masterminds. We talked about strategy, growing our brand, our business, and our podcast. Talked about not rushing and killing 2 birds with 1 stone with your content. And I appreciate your time, Liz. And if you're listening, go ahead and check out the podcast, which is already down in the show notes. So you'll see the BizBook Broadcast podcast down there as well. I will see you on the next episode.
This is serious. Don't go. Now that you've gotten whatever value that you feel that you got, the actionable takeaways, you need to implement the stuff that you learned. If you remember me talking about bird church once, and they learn how to fly, and then they walk home, I don't want you to walk home. I want you to fly home. So take the steps, take the actionable steps for your benefit so that you can become a better podcaster. That's the only thing that I ask of you. And I'll see you for more actionable tips on the very next episode.